Esther chapter 2. And we're going to take a look at this. And one of the things that when you're studying the book of Esther, keep in mind that it is a book that does not mention God. No one is really condemned as far as being, I mean, you have Haman and his sons and so forth, and those who are trying to do the Jews harm. But as far as, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's a narrative, all right? And a lot of times in the Bible, when 1st and 2nd Chronicles, 1st and 2nd Kings, a lot of times the writer will tell you, okay, this king sinned, okay, and this was not good. Other times that they're not so, they're just telling you what happened. And that's what we have here in the book of Esther. The writer is not saying Esther did the right thing or that Esther did the wrong thing. He's simply supplying the facts. And I think as you'll look, you'll see that there are some things here that are just not good. There's no way around it, no way to explain it away. So let's take a look at Esther, and then we will probably spend a little bit of time here, maybe start chapter 3, and then we'll fly through the rest of it because it's basically a story that all of us are quite familiar with. But there's some things that I wanted to bring out in chapter 2, and I need to change versions here. It says, after these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased. Remember what happened at the end of chapter 2? Vashti wouldn't come to his drunken feast, and so he deposed her. And, he was encouraged to do that by his cabinet, if you will, his advisors. But notice, and some speculate that this could be right after the Greek situation, where his armies are turned back and things are not in a good time for him now. Secular history even records that King Ahasuerus, or Xerxes as he's called in history, kind of immersed himself in his harem to get over it, I guess you could say, comfort himself. Brethren, what we're looking at here is something that's hard for us in the Western world to put our minds around. Sexual perversion is something that, I think hits us all pretty near and dear. We don't like it. There's a few things that really get people's emotions going. Rape, pedophilia, things of that nature. We just, as a civilized society, don't have much patience for such things. But I think you would have to agree that it's proliferated our society. So I'm just beside myself. I don't care what party you are. I don't care what your leanings are. But when I see that fella that's running for president kissing that fella, brethren, I'm going to tell you what, it makes me sick to my stomach. And the idea that this country could be, how far away. I remember 25 years ago when I first started preaching, one of the illustrations that I would use, because it was just easy, okay? You know how when you're trying to describe sin and stuff that we should stay away from, you just got a whole sundry list. But when I first started preaching homosexuality, that was just understood. You could mention that, people are like, oh yeah, man, that's really not good. It amazes me that in this so little time, that so many people are trying to say that that's a healthy lifestyle, that that's just fine. People ought to be able to do whatever they wish. And, who am I to judge? Well, folks, I am not a judge. But I can read my Bible, and I can read what the judge has said, and he has condemned that action in every dispensation that there has been. And there was a guy the other day said, why it was just a thread, and he is a blog, and he said, why is it that we haven't been so forthright with men who have been other than what they ought to have been, in office? And of course, Kennedy's name comes up, Clinton's name comes up. Not everybody, of course, Trump and his previous experiences. And I'll tell you something else, brethren. I was always a big Dwight D. Eisenhower fan, I thought that man was a great general, and I thought he was a pretty good president. And then my world came tumbling down when I learned that he had had a mistress the whole time he was overseas. When he came back to America, he still had the same mistress. I'm going to tell you, for me as a man, even not as a Christian man, I mean just as a man, I've never been one to like liars. Does anybody just like liars? Anybody just say, you know, I love running with people that lie. That's what I like to do. No, nobody likes that. And yet you stand before a crowd of people, a man and a woman, and they take a vow that I'm going to be faithful to you until death does us part. You know, and if a man can't stay true to that vow, when he puts his hand on that Bible and swears that he'll uphold the Constitution and all that, who's to say that means anything? You know, if he can't control himself in that one vow, I've just always had I just kind of double look at folks like that. So what we're seeing here is a society where women are nothing more than childbearing property. I don't even get it. One of the things that turned me off so fast to Mormonism and the Church of the Latter-day Saints was to just go back and read its beginning. Read about the man who started it, and read about how many wives he had, and read about the fact that one of the members of his congregation, he told him that the Lord had told him that morning that he was supposed to be with his wife. And of course that man, so eat up with it, he said, you know, who was I to argue against God? Like the God of heaven, who is so clear on his teachings as far as sexuality and morality go, would ever say something like that. It's amazing to me that men can be so deceived. You know, when Jesus was questioned about marriage, what did he say? Have you not read that he that made them, where did he go? He went to the garden. He went as far back as he possibly could go, and he reestablished that principle that you have one man, one woman together. That's where the family comes in. That's where children are made, and that's the healthy environment. But somewhere right there in the early parts of Genesis, one fella figured out one woman wasn't enough for him. So he got two. And by the time we get to Jacob, you want to see a dysfunctional family. Look at Abraham's seed. Look at Isaac's child. Look at the life of Jacob. He was a supplanter, and his whole life was a mess. Two wives. He got tricked, you know, on his honeymoon night. How in the world you don't even have a conversation? I don't even know. But somehow he was tricked. And then not only did he take both women as his wife, but he took their handmaids later on, you remember. So 4 different women in the household. Is it any question why, you know, is it surprising that one of the young men found his stepmother attractive? And of course, that's why Reuben will look. Sexual immorality. We don't have a lot of patience for it. I don't. I'm like, man, you got to be able to control your vessel. You know, you've got to be able to do that. If you can't, and it's a powerful thing. Yes. What was that? Was it Gandhi? When asked how he was able to, I don't know, reach nirvana or whatever it was he was doing, he said if there'd been one more thing as powerful as hunger and the sex drive, he would not have been able to do it. Well, they're real close, aren't they? And we're going to see in this story the Eastern mindset, which a man considered himself somebody, the larger his harem was. Isn't that amazing? And you know, you look at the seed of Christ. It wasn't excused from such. You ever heard of Solomon? Yeah, think about that. 700 wives. 300 lesser wives known as concubines. 1,000 women. Do you realize that if he was with one of those women every night, that it would take over 3 years to get through his harem? Isn't that amazing? God he even warned them about multiplying wives. So what you're going to have here is a king that, in order to get over his whiny, Ahasuerus is an awful individual, first and foremost. Okay? He's a warmonger. He's a person who wants to have his way. And so his servants say, hey, why don't you go out and find all the young virgins. We'll have them come in for the king. And so let the king appoint officers, verse 3, in the provinces of his kingdom. Remember, he's got 127 different provinces. And have the young ladies, the fair young virgins, unto Shushan the palace. Bring them all to the capital city. And then these women are going to go through they're going to go to the Hegi, the king's chamberlain. He is the harem director. He would be a eunuch. Kings in the Asian world would have the guards who oversaw their harems were made into eunuchs. And I think that's a powerful thing. Remember what Jesus said when his disciples, when Jesus talked about marriage, he said, have you not read, he that made them in the beginning made them male and female? And for this cause a man will leave his father and mother and shall cleave unto his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. And so they want to say, well, wait a minute, man. Moses said we could divorce our wives. And Jesus said, for the hardness of your hearts, he suffered it so. But from the beginning, it was not. That wasn't the way it's supposed to be. And then he gave verse 9, but I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except for the cause of fornication, and marrieth another, doth commit adultery. And whoso marrieth her, doth commit adultery. And remember the reaction of the apostles? Whoa! Who can live like that? That was their idea. Man, if that's the case, a man with his wife, nobody will get married. And what did Jesus say? Don't worry about it then. No. He said some are eunuchs, in other words, incapable of having relations. Some are that way from birth. If you've ever been around NICUs or intensive cares or anything of that nature, some children are born and they're just never able to reproduce or have the various components needed to do such. He says some are born that way. Some are made that way by kings with harems. And then he says some make themselves eunuchs. Why? For the kingdom's sake. In other words, they realize, I can't have a wife. And so they don't do that. That's when Paul talks about controlling your own vessel there in the first letter of Thessalonians, in Thessalonians, he's talking about you got to control yourself. Here is a man, no control. When we think about these young virgins that are being brought in, this is probably something that a lot of them weren't forced to do. A lot of commentators, man, you read this section, they'll talk about how the king goes in and forces himself on all these young ladies. They're brought in and they're raped and so forth. Brethren, think about this. Probably the case that these young women, I would say most of them, are probably volunteering to go. I mean, this is opportunity to be the queen of whatever, the whole empire. And you think about some of the outlying cities and stuff and some of the country places they were from. We're talking about going to the big city. So this was an opportunity in a land where women were not afforded a lot of opportunities in general. Okay? So a lot of them were probably willing participants, if you will. And so it says, now in Shushan the palace, there was a certain Jew. That's the first time we find out the Mordecai. And his name is probably based off the Babylonian god Marduk, just like remember Daniel and Meshach and Abednego, they were all named after given, Chaldean names. Said they'd been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity, and he brought up Hadassah. Hadassah is the Hebrew word for myrtle. And this is new to me. I did not realize in some of the Feast of Booths, where the Jews will make themselves tents and stay outside for 7 days, they actually, in this parade they carry myrtle branches because the myrtle branch, the myrtle tree represents peace and thanksgiving. And so Hadassah means myrtle, and Esther means star, his uncle's daughter. For she had neither father nor mother. So basically he has raised up Esther. And when her mother and father were dead, he took him to his own daughter. So it came to pass when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were to gather together into Shushan the palace to the custody of Hegai, that Esther was brought also into the king's house to the custody of Hegai, keeper of the women. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness from him. So what happens here? You have this little Jewish girl, and some qualities we're going to see. If you look at the Hebrew word, basically she had it seems as though she was pleasant to look upon. Nice figure, pretty face, that of that nature. But were Jews supposed to intermarry with Gentiles? Remember, everybody that's not a Jew is a what? A Gentile. That's just how they categorized you, You were either a Goy or a Hebrew or a Jew. And so they're not supposed to do that. So why is she doing that? Well, it seems that Mordecai is encouraging her to do that. And brethren, as we go down through here, there's no cleaning this up, okay? It's just, it is what it is. So she goes into the guy who runs the harem. Now, this is the pre-harem. You've got the after-the-fact harem, and you've got the pre-harem. Now, the pre-harem is going to be where you get prettied up for 12 months. Can you imagine that? For 12 months, they're going to take care of the outside of the body, the physical body. They're going to take care of that. They're going to do everything they can to make her presentable, make all these girls presentable to the king. Mordecai goes by every day at the court of the women's house to see how Esther's doing. And when it was the maid's turn to go into King Ahasuerus, after that she had been 12 months according to the manner of women, and they give you the breakdown. For 6 months it's with oil and myrrh, and for 6 months with sweet odors, and with other things for the purifying of the women. This is a huge process, a costly process, all to fulfill one man's lust. And though thus came every maiden unto the king. This is not where the king has his little tights on, and he rides the stallion up and he takes her by the hand and they go walk in the magnolia bushes, and they have all these folks around and they have a big, love story, and he gives her a box of chocolates and gets to know her name and all. That's not what this is. Okay, it's exactly what you probably think it is. And so every night, one of these ladies, young girls, are brought into the king. And once you have been with the king, you can't go back to harem 1. You've got to go to harem 2, okay? Because now you are, I suppose, damaged goods. I don't know. You're the king's new concubine. And so basically what happens, if you don't get selected as queen, you're going to live like a widow the rest of your life. You're not going to be able to leave because you've been with the king. You're not going to be able to have children. You're not going to have a life, so to speak, except to be a part of this dormitory full of concubines, unless the king remembers your name and calls you back. So thus every maiden of the king, whoever she desired, was given to her. When they went in, the evening she went, and on the morrow she returned to the second house of the women. Remember, you get the first harem, the preparation harem, if you will, and then you have the other place. And you get turned over to Ashgaz, the king's chamberlain, which kept the concubines. She came into the king no more, except the king delighted in her and called her by name. Now, when Esther's turn comes in, she goes in and does what all the rest of them been doing. And you cannot clean this up. And brethren, here's the thing. A lot of times when we're reading about Bible characters, Joe, I don't know about you, but sometimes we feel the need, we got to clean them up, right? They probably had a candlelight dinner, and she told some good jokes that really stuck out, and no, that's not what happens here. And it's not mine and your job to take Bible characters and try to clean them up. Basically what we have here is a narrative of how God took a really bad situation, a really negative situation, and is going to deliver an entire nation because of the great lusts of one fella who can't be satisfied with, normal, like other people. And so she goes in, and now when her turn came, she was given, and the Haggai, the king's chamberlain, verse 15, he's been with this king for a long time. He knows what he likes, he knows what he don't like. And so as he prepares Esther, he gives her the heads up, He gives her the exact things she'll need, the right perfumes and everything, that whatever. So because Esther had obtained favor in the sight of all of them that looked upon her. Verse 16, so Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus to the royal house the 10th month, and in the 7th year of his reign. Now remember, we started this process. Vashti was kind of kicked out in the 3rd year, so it's been about 4 years now. And it says, and the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. So basically, she wins the lottery, if you will. She becomes the queen. It's just not good. But anyway, that's what happened. Then the king made a great feast unto all the princes and his servants, even Esther's feast, and made a release. Now, Corey, does yours have, and he made a release there to the provinces? What is the ESV? How does that read? It's verse 18, I'm sorry. Does it remission? Okay. Huh, wow. The ASV there says he also granted a remission of taxes. Okay, where the King James there, notice where the King James says made a release to the province. The ESV translates that, taxes, didn't charge them taxes. The NASB says he also made a holiday. If you've ever heard of the word Hanukkah, raise your hand. We've all heard Hanukkah, right? Yeah. That's the only time in the Bible it's used. The NASB translates it holiday. What we looked at in the dedication of the tabernacle is called Hanukkah. Hanukkah got a guttural sound. This is the only time you find Hanukkah. Today, when you look on your calendar and it says Hanukkah, it's not nothing to do with this. What you're looking at is the temple dedication. What you're looking at here later is going to be the Feast of Purim. If you see the word Purim on your calendar, that's what this is going to be. The big story we're talking about is all about. So notice when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not yet made known the kindred of her people. That's something he told her going in. So you've got to, because Mordecai coaches her up, says, don't tell him you're a Jew. So there must be some anti-Semite kind of mentality there. So he's telling them, don't let them know that yet. Now remember, we don't know anything that's fixing to happen. We don't know what's going to happen with Haman. We don't know that everybody's going to be sentenced to death. We don't know any of that. That's the dialogue is going to work out. But right now, as Esther's becoming queen, that hasn't happened yet. So, you could be saying, well, these were desperate times, and Mordecai needed to get her in there so she could save her people. He doesn't know that yet. That hasn't happened. So she had not made her kindred known, even as Mordecai had commanded her, for Esther did what Mordecai told her, as she had done under his care. So there's a real good chance that she is going through this process because of Mordecai. Once again, we don't have to give apology for that. We didn't do it, and God's not saying that's right. The writer of this is not saying it's right. He's just simply saying this is what happened. He said, while Mordecai, now this is going to be a linchpin for the rest of the story. While Mordecai is sitting there at the king's gate waiting to talk to Esther and so forth, he overhears these two guys, Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's officials, from those who guarded the door, and became angry and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. King Ahasuerus is not a good guy. He is a guy that a lot of people would like to kill. As a matter of fact, he's going to die probably about 13 years later, but he's going to die at the hand of people in his bedchamber. There's going to be some more guys who, just like these two, they guard his bedroom door. Somebody, a decade or so later, is going to do that very thing. That's how his life is going to end. He made a lot of enemies. That whole thing he did in Greece, trying to retake, it did not work. So there's a lot of folks that are upset with him. You can see, doesn't that frustrate you to see, government tax dollars and stuff wasted? And here you've got all this going on just to supply, it's crazy. But the plot became known to Mordecai, and he tells Queen Esther, and Esther is going to inform the king in Mordecai's name. Now, when the plot was investigated, found to be so, both those men were hanged on the gallows, as is written in the book of the Chronicles, in the king's presence. So that is how Esther becomes queen. And, brethren, that just, I don't like that at all. I wished it was, something different, but that's how that was done at that time. But God is going to take a terrible situation, and he's going to make a very great thing happen in that when this plot of Haman's comes around, it's not going to hurt anybody. Notice in chapter 3, it says, after these events, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite. Now, a lot of people say, well, look, that's the king Agag. Remember Agag? When Samuel had to hack Agag to pieces because Saul didn't kill the king Agag when he attacked because remember the Amalekites had attacked Israel in the rear when they were in the wilderness. And so God says, I'm going to wipe them out, and told King Saul. Remember, that's why Saul loses his kingdom. A lot of people want to say he is kin to him. We don't know that. But that's pretty good speculation, though. It says, advanced him and established his authority over all the princes who were with him. And notice verse 2, it says, all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman. In other words, Haman has become kind of like a Daniel, if you will. He is top dog of the satraps. You know, you've got all these guys who are over these provinces. Remember how Daniel was one of the three that when you broke down the whole empire, he was in charge of 1/3 of it. So Haman has really been elevated to a really high place. It says, so for the king had commanded concerning him. Notice, but Mordecai neither bowed down nor paid homage. Then the king's servants who are, you know, they're watching this and they're saying, Mordecai, why are you transgressing the king's command? I didn't come out of the NASB. Why are you doing this? Why are you transgressing the king's will? And Mordecai, of course, wasn't going to do it. They said, why are you doing that? Verse 4, now it came to pass when they spake daily unto him. This is not something that was one-time thing. They asked him several times. You know, brethren, you can find all kinds of information, people speculating on that, but we don't know why Mordecai just wouldn't bow to the guy. And a lot of people say, well, Jews were not supposed to worship, you know, men. Or it is not that is not worship, okay? When it's what would you call that, anybody? What would you call that if you kneel before the king or the queen? Homage, reference, not a reference. I'm just referencing here. No, you're giving reverence. You know, you're saying, you know, you're bowing yourself. If you went to England, and let's just say the queen's riding by, and she says, oh, hey, why don't you come over to the palace later? You know, rolls down her car window. I'm sure that would happen, right? And so you go. It would not be wrong for you to bow down to her. I think there's a difference when you're like the president and stuff. I don't think you're not supposed to do that. But anyway, as us lowly, you know, regular people, that's just a way to say hello, if you will. It's a you know, bowing to their position. It's a matter of common courtesy. But he won't do it. And man, for the life of me, I don't know why. But when Mordecai finds out about it, now when Haman finds out about it, he's ticked off. And Haman is in such a position that in my mind, I don't understand why he just wouldn't kill Mordecai or have Mordecai punished until he would, or either if he wouldn't, then, you know, execute him. He's in that kind of position. He's in that kind of authority. But I think we see a little bit about Haman's personality in that it's not just enough to kill Mordecai. What does he want to do? Let's look at verse 6. And he thought to lay hands on Mordecai alone. You know, he had the authority to do it. He could have said, hey, listen here, bud. You know, there's a certain protocol you're supposed to follow. You need to do that. But they had showed him, because remember he told those guys why, you know, when he wasn't bound down, that he was a Jew. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy, notice this, all the Jews. Man, doesn't that say a lot about his demeanor? It's not good enough just to kill the man that's responsible for it, but you want to wipe out not only just his children or something. You know, I can see going after his, you know, his progeny, but everybody, the whole nation. That's what he wants to do. And so that's what the story is going to be about. This man is so wicked, but he's so powerful and so rich that he can pull this off. He can pull this off, and of course the king, he don't really care. He's too busy harem making. And so, you know, so they cast what's called pur, okay? And that's why we have, you see Purim, that is talking about this. It's the casting of lots. And so he wants to destroy all of them. In the first month, that is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur. Now, brethren, we have no idea what that is. Some have speculated that it's like a dice. And I think it probably could be. Any of y'all ever played Dungeons and Dragons? Anybody? Man, am I the only person that ever saw that or did that? Anyway, you know, they got dice, 20-sided dice. You know that? You know, when I think of dice, I don't even know how many sides that have. How many sides does normal? 6? Yeah, that's right. There's 6 numbers on it. Duh. But they've got a lot of other dice. So I don't know what that meant. Were they drawing short straws? I don't know. But whatever it was, he drawed the first one out for the day, the next one for the month. And so it came down that it's going to be 12 months out in the month of Adar that they're going to do this. And so Haman puts his plot together. And notice how he lays this out. He says there's a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in the provinces. There's this group of folks, kind of like you might, maybe in Italy, you might have said the gypsies. You know, they were kind of, you know how they were sort of everywhere? And he says they're just out there in all the provinces of the kingdom. Their laws are diverse from all people. They don't act like everybody else. They keep not the king's laws. Now, was that true? Absolutely not. Just like the guys writing the letters we read about in Ezra, where they're leaning it towards what they want. That's what Haman's doing here. He's saying they don't keep your laws, king. They have no respect for you whatsoever. And the king's profit suffers as a result of that. And so it's not good for them to be here because your bottom line is being affected, king. So if it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of this business to bring them to the king's treasury. And the king took his ring. He said, hey, knock yourself out. Gives it to Haman, Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. And the king said unto Haman, the silver is good, do what you need to do. And so the king's scribes call in the 13th day of the month, and it's written according to Haman. Now, guys, think about that. This is not just 2 or 3 dudes coming in with some legal pads. We're talking about 127 different provinces, and it's a good chance that there would have even been different languages. So you've got, inside each province. So this is a major undertaking. And this law is going to go out, and notice it's going to be sealed with the king's ring. And what does it say? The letters are sent by post, mail people, to the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, to take the spoil of them for prey. Oh man, isn't that awful? Here he is, he's given permission to anybody that wants to. Look, we're going to kill the Jews this day, and if you get in on it and you help, you take what you want. Just take their stuff. They got a business, kill them. Take their stuff. It's yours. Don't worry about it. You won't be prosecuted. As a matter of fact, you'll be doing the state a favor. Rather than that, as Americans growing up in the day and age which we do, we are so far removed from anything like that. It's hard for us to even fathom. How could you come up with something like that? I challenge you. If you have the time and opportunity, it won't take you long. Go back and read a little bit of the history of, say, the 1500s to the 1700s in Europe, and look at how quickly people were killed for something so simple as not letting their children be baptized. You believe that? Jack, that's hard to believe, isn't it? Here you got a guy who says, no, you're not going to sprinkle my kids into the Catholic Church. And they take him down to the place and cut off his head. Me and Robbie were listening to a couple of really great history lessons this week. But there was this one group, you've heard of Anabaptists, right? They were called the Waldensians. They were actually even before the Anabaptists. And so they didn't agree with Catholic baptism, and so they were rebaptized. So they had a second baptism. So Anna having the idea of a second baptism. And so to not only kill those people, but to make it a symbolic thing, they had what was called, I've never heard this term before, the third baptism. And you probably got an idea what that means, right? Good deal. They baptized you the third time, but they didn't bring you up. They didn't bring you up. So that's how you were executed. You want water, they would say, I guess? We're going to give you all the water that your lungs can hold. And they would keep you under the water long enough to kill you. There's the thing called the 30-year war. I was doing a little bit of reading about this last night in Europe, about between the 1500s and 1600s. 8 million, I'm not making that number up, 8 million people died in that conflict between the Protestants and the Roman Catholic Church in a 30-year span. 8 million. We talk about how horrific the Jews, the Holocaust, absolutely, right? No doubt about it. Horrific. 6 million people just killed. 8 million people killed, and all of them wearing the name of Christ. That's amazing. This side killing this side for God. this side, trying to kill this side to stay alive because of the persecution. Absolutely amazing. So when you read this, you think about a people being destroyed, try the best you can to understand people have not valued life like we do today. You know, the human life is the most important thing on this planet. Do you realize this planet was created for what? Cats and dogs? I know some people that think it is. No, it was created for people, for little babies, grow up into adults, to have other little babies. And God said, have dominion over this. It is created for us as a place to see how we are going to behave. Human life is such a precious commodity, yet is so little respected in our world today. I wished it was different. I know you do too. Notice the posts go out, verse 15. The decree is given, and once the king, just like Vashti, you know, the king got to thinking about what he had done and said, man, I miss old Vashti. But he couldn't call her back. Why? Because when you have a Mede or a Persian king that puts something in writing and signs it, guess what? No changing it. That's going to come into play as we get further along in our story, because this is law now. On this day in December, 12th month out, all the Jews are going to die. People have free game. They're yours. Do with them what you will, and you can keep the spoils. That's going to come back around as we get deeper into the story. Hopefully, we'll be able to finish the book of Esther. At least that's my plan next week, because everything really takes off from here. Well, I appreciate your good attention. And, we studied Esther not that long ago. I think it's been, not long ago. It's like 5 years ago in our adult Sunday school class. But, when you go and you look at that whole situation, you really spend time with it, it's really makes me thankful that I've grown up in the day and time that I have. I am so glad that as Christians, our families were so important, and we respect our spouses, at least we should, so much, and realize that our wives are our helpmeets, and wives that our husbands are the head of the house, and we're to reverence them. At the same time, though, they are to love us as they love their own bodies. You can't have a more nurturing situation for children to come into. I am thankful that that is the situation that we are in this country today, and I know that you see that being attacked, and that's why we must be, militant in our defense of it. And by that I mean say, listen, that's not the way it's supposed to be. A man and a man cannot do for a child. First of all, they can't bring a child into the world, but they can't give that child the perspective that a husband and a wife, or mother and a father, can. As far as the men and women are just different. They are just different. Isn't that a great thing? Oh, my man, if it was all up to me, you wouldn't imagine what my house would look like. Why do we need drywall for? Just leave those studs exposed. Look how easy it is to hang things on this. Isn't this great? You want pictures? Hey, honey, I'll hang them right here on this stud. We just think differently. And boy, am I thankful for that. We cook differently, too. I'm thankful for that, too. Maybe you're here tonight, you're not a child of God. Listen, Esther grew up in a time when things were really, really strange. Not like today, when things are a little clearer. And although we don't want to, spend a whole lot of time with that, we don't have to do those type of things today. But what we do have to do is obey God. And we have to do what God says. God has promised us everlasting life, but He's laid down some conditions for that. And part of that's becoming obedient to the gospel of Christ. Let me encourage you, if you're not a Christian, to become one. If in times past you've obeyed the gospel, but you left your first love, to come home. And let me encourage you, if you're hurting, man, there's nothing, better than having a room full of Christians praying for you and praying on your behalf. I don't think we take advantage of that like we need to. For some reason, I think we've gotten scared of saying, hey, listen, man, I could use your prayers. I'm in a rough patch right now, and I could use some help. One of the things they talked about this week, and one of the things we listened to, was the fact that just about every Sunday on at least every pew, there's somebody hurting. You've got some pain. people healing from sickness, or people healing from loss, or struggling with sin. It's a lot more prevalent than we think, and we'd like to think that, we don't, there's strength in it, brother. There's strength in people praying for you and encouraging you. Take advantage of it if you need it. We stand ready to help you in any way that we can. If you're subject, would you come? As together we stand and sing.